We're going to start the City Council work session for Tuesday, May 15, 2018. The first topic is to discuss the scope of the Robert A. Lee Recreation Center Improvement Project. Who's going to start, Julie or Ron or who? Julie?
Good evening. Julie Seidel-Johnson, Parks and Recreation Director. I'm here to get some input from you on the rec center renovations. Most of this information is in your packet, so I'll go through it fairly quickly on the slides here. We're talking about Robert A. Lee Recreation Center here near downtown. It's a building that we have been slowly renovating and trying to spruce up over the last 2.5, maybe a little bit longer, but since I've been here. When I came, it was, especially the upstairs was fairly dark and dingy, and not a lot of people wanted to hang out there. Well, we've made a lot of really conscientious efforts with the resources we've had to make it an open, lighter, inviting space. If you spent much time there recently, we have families coming back. We have families spending time in our upper lobby. The new railings that we had with the latest renovation have been very popular. New stairs that are safer and meet our accessibility guidelines. And then we did the 2 new restrooms downstairs, which we didn't have fully accessible restrooms before that. And we now have 2 off the game room. So we've had a number of smaller improvements made, and we'd like to talk about the next phase as we go on. Footprint of the building, Gilbert and College, with our new neighbor headed high above us to the north, but just a really nice location. We have a lot of people working in downtown, walking through the building, stopping in, coming to work out, a lot of families coming for swim lessons, a lot of use of the gyms at different times. One of the areas that hasn't been used very much is our racquetball court and what's now the game room, although I understand it's had several different uses in the history of the building. Right now it has a couple of pool tables, a foosball table, and a couple other things, but used occasionally, but not on a regular basis. This project would look at creating a new space out of those spaces, renovating them into kind of one large box space, which I'll show you a drawing of in a minute. The other priority of this next phase is to provide accessible changing area off the pool deck. So right now there is, although we have 2 accessible restrooms, they don't have showers in them, so parents coming with a child of the opposite sex that want to change in a space and shower for the pool, that's difficult to do right now. So this would solve that problem for us. You can stop me for questions as we go. So some of the pictures here on the bottom show the current game room. The access to the racquetball court has been problematic. It's been named in 2 prior studies as one of the primary issues with our building and public use of our building. It's just an awkward space. We have some storage back there. It's awkward. Some of you saw it on our tour last winter. And not used very well at all. So what we're envisioning is creating one larger space with those 2 smaller areas, and then providing, as you can see here, providing a new access from the outside off the current loading dock, although this is all preliminary design. That would be things we'd have to look into further as we move on through design, and also providing an access to the outside, kind of up there in the northeast corner. There's a possibility to do some daylighting and get some windows in to get some natural light into the area. So one of our questions for you is, we're envisioning this as a space for a nonprofit to come in and do some programming, bring some more use into our building. We've had some preliminary discussion about who that might be, but we'd like your input and direction on, do we choose that now or do we choose it after the space is built out? Okay. The other areas that we'd like to consider in Phase 2 renovations, these are some of the issues that we have in the building. The top left corner is probably our number 1 question in the rec center. Where is the men's restroom? People stand in the hallway up there and say, where is the men's restroom? The signage, the access is odd, and it's truly not accessible as far as ADA accessibility, some of the fixtures and that sort of thing. Same with the women's restroom on the upper level. The other issues with the upper level, our previous ADA study showed a number of items within the staff office areas that are non-compliant. Phase 1, we fixed all of those in the main office area where my office and Tammy and Chad and Kumi are located. But we have all these other offices that have been kind of fitted into closets. Or at one time, I think there was dressing rooms because the social hall was used for a stage or performance area. So it's had some different uses. The offices aren't considered ADA accessible. There's security issues and just kind of overall use issues with having them kind of squirreled away in these little areas. The middle picture on the bottom shows the sound panels in the gym. If you've been in the gym recently, it looks better than it did back in January. We painted those with like 3 coats of paint, but they're still old and they still look pretty ragged. We'd like to get those replaced as part of this renovation. The other thing on the upper level would be to contemplate moving the kitchen. So right now the kitchen is between meeting room A and B, but it's not used very much back there. It's used by one of the churches that uses the building on Sundays. Most of the uses we get for serving meals now happen in the social hall, and a lot of requests for that use. So this plan would show moving them to an area kind of close to where the elevator is. Right now it has 4 staff offices. That would become a new catering kitchen. We don't envision this to be a full-service commercial kitchen by any means, but just a nice serving space, probably for warming items, dishwasher, that kind of maybe, but mainly just having a lot of counter space for final food prep or potlucks, lots of places to plug in the crock pot, because every potluck we have, we blow the circuit, I think, as we go on. And that would move some of the offices to what is now meeting room B, and then we would reconfigure those spaces down there. So the options with phase 2 of the building right now would be to do, the priorities are the changing restroom area off the pool deck, and then the racquetball game room area, and then one of these 2 projects. So either this one, which is the upper level, which would be the restrooms, moving the kitchen, reconfiguring the offices, kind of bringing everything on the upper level up to accessibility standards, and making it more usable for the public. Or option 2, I want to show you as just an idea and get some feedback on this. I think my pictures are in the different order. Okay. And this was brought to us by the architects we've chosen for this project. Should have introduced them. They're here. Justin and Josh from OPN Architects is the firm we're planning on using. They showed us this concept during their interview, and I want to show it to you and get some real feedback on it. Do you think it would work or not? So the lower level pool locker rooms right now are traditional locker room setup. If you haven't been there in a while, there's a men's and a women's with various open kind of changing rooms and open shower areas, toilet enclosures, but generally just 2 big open spaces in each one. So this is similar, although this shows some walls in different places even right now. The new concept they showed us was, what if we took that same space and made it into 8 individual changing areas, or 8 individual restrooms. So each one of those areas would have its own door. It would have its own toilet, sink, and shower. So each one would be a self-enclosed shower area. It's big enough probably for a family of 4 to go in and use together. The thought being, and then the lockers on the outside. There is a kind of another shower area in the middle for people that come without needing to change. You know, a lot of the swim lesson kids come in their swimsuits already. They could just shower and simply go on the pool deck. Very different concept. I'm not sure it's been done to this scale in any other public pool facility. You do see it in some family changing locker rooms, like they'll have a men's locker room, a women's locker room, and a smaller family one in the middle. We've been kind of shopping it around to some of our participants and our staff, and so far the answer is, wow, I never thought of that, but yeah, that could work. Even with the day camps, with the large group of kids coming in, they think this would be something that would actually be helpful to them, because they have a lot of kids that want to change and have privacy even at a young age. So,
Can you flip back to the prior image?
yep.
Trying to figure out where that is.
No, I know where it is. I just wanted to.
So it would take the same kind of corridor space, and this is very preliminary design, so there's lots of things we'd have to kind of shuffle around and still figure out probably. It's more the concept. Do you think the individual, it would be very inclusive and From a maintenance side, it'd be awesome for us because right now we don't have any female custodians. So if something happens in the women's locker room, we have to close it to address it during the day. This is open, and so if something happens in one of the restrooms, shower areas, we could close just one, either to address it for cleaning or for maintenance concerns.
Well, going back to Jim's point, I think I am confused where this is at. So this is near the pool area or
Right.
inside?
This is
So this is to the, if I walked in from where the gym is, or where the where the gym
so
is,
that would be
it's
right
to
here.
the right.
You would walk in here. These are the stairs to go upstairs. Right now, you would come and go to the men's locker room right about here. So that you would just continue down this hallway just a little bit. It would be a new hallway back here and a new line of where the current locker rooms are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got confused. I thought we were talking about inside the pool area.
No.
So
So
it
we
would be,
replace the current locker rooms.
it would be men's and women's
Yeah.
joint locker area with separate rooms? Is that correct? Yeah.
So it's essentially a hallway out here with lockers, and I don't think there's any way we would need this many lockers, but lockers out here, so in this common space, and probably benches for people that want to sit down and just change shoes or whatever. But then to actually change clothes and shower for swimming or after a workout or something, you would go into one of these individual areas, and essentially one person per area or a family.
Comparing this to the previous one, it looks like you're keeping about the same number of toilets. I mean, you're not.
I think so, and we would probably have to per code, right? So
Okay.
we would have to work that into the design, yeah.
So you want us to process other stuff and then come back to this? What are you thinking?
It's up to you. I can show you one more slide, and then you can process away. How about that? The other thing I wanted to show you was our idea on some of the signage. The other comment or question we get often in the rec center is just, where is anything? And we've been slowly working on signage, but we'd like to see more of a graphic, larger overall signage, directional signage throughout the building in a fun sort of graphic way. These are just examples, but this would be another part of the project. So.
Julie, is that question 5 as far as which one first?
More, yeah, or how would you like us to make that decision when we have full information? We don't have a cost estimate on the locker room change right now. We have one from last year on the upper level, but the first part of this study will give us cost estimate and feasibility as to, how that would work.
I think the biggest part of this work session tonight is to make sure that you're comfortable with the way in which we're continuing to move forward on the Robert A. Lee Rec Center remodeling. Julie outlined several different projects we need to do, we intend to do, but if you've got grander visions for or a different direction, then we kind of need to know that now. Specifically when it comes to the project that you moved up in the CIP in the CIP process, we need to focus really heavily on that game room piece, where staff is suggesting that it's a good opportunity to partner with a nonprofit that has a complementary use to the rec center. I think that's where we need most of the direction, and then the other things like the locker rooms, signage, and some of the other projects that Julie mentioned. If you have strong opinions on those, let us know. Otherwise, we're going to continue to prioritize those like we have been, and that's going to be based on cost opinions and our own internal priorities that primarily the park staff has from working in that building on a day-to-day basis.
You start with the or I didn't know if you.
I'd say start with the the racquetball facility.
racquetball. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to the racquetball court.
Yeah, what are the options? What could we put in there?
Well, the primary one that's been talked about has been the bike library. Staff has not talked with them directly. At one time, they talked about it being something of a maker space or something like that, or an arts space open to the public. It could be just about anything, really. I mean, we're envisioning it as kind of an open box at this point with better access. We would like to see it, in my vision, it would be a nonprofit operating it so they could have hours similar to the rec center, but maybe not completely the same, and they would have access to it when because they would have individual access from the outside for it.
Would we be able to close off that space so they would have additional hours or hours that are different from the rec center?
Except it doesn't have a restroom.
Okay.
So
So I can, I guess, start because I'm excited about this. I know we talked about it a little bit at kind of the something where you walk around with people. Tour. There we go. Could not remember that small word. I'm in favor of option one. I think it's been mentioned at the bike library a couple of times, and I have no reason why it shouldn't be. But I do like a process by which we go out and hear from interested nonprofits for the space, and so that would be my preference. And then I think just in answering one and two, as far as the financial expectations, I would want some type of, because of the space, and I have, I guess, another comment about some additional spaces, but I'll wait till the end. Like a subsidized rental space, similar to what we would provide for our nonprofits now or currently. I mean, I know that most of the stuff is free, but for the fact that they'd be staying there, or whoever that would be staying there for a longer period of time than what we would normally have for rental space, then I would say some type of fee to give it some level of value, as well as electricity and some of those other things. So that would be my comment to that.
I'm a little unclear about what you said at first. What I understood you to say was that you favor the bike library.
Yeah, so option one was create a generic box space, solicit proposals from nonprofits, select and allow selected nonprofit build out the space.
So he didn't say the bike library.
All right.
Oh, I said I was interested in the bike library, but I'm interested in opening it up.
That was
and
the
hearing.
second part I
Yeah.
heard that you wanted to hear from.
I just didn't want to, the comment is Kingsley hates the bike library as we leave. I just wanted to make sure. I like the bike library, but I'm interested in opening up for
So kind of like
multiple.
soliciting proposals.
Correct, like an
basically,
RFP
for
process,
nonprofits.
something like that, yeah.
What do the rest of you think?
I guess my question is with the timing and the cost. I mean, if we don't select one now and you do the generic box, then you've got to do additional build out depending upon who's selected to use that space. Do we have any idea how much that's increasing the cost or time until somebody can get in there versus if we spent a couple of months figuring out who it was going to be and thus could actually design and build it out for them from the get-go? Does that save us time and money?
Justin, do you have an opinion on that? I have Justin, our architect. talk
Yeah,
about that.
Justin Bishop with OPN Architects. I think there would obviously be synergies if we knew everything day one to plan from that standpoint. So it's a little hard to answer that quantifiably, but to say we could make sure that we're not doing anything that would have to be undone, I think that would be the approach that we could take. And depending on how the timelines work out, there could be time to not be totally disconnected from the original construction as well. So.
I was kind of assuming that we would, our project would include the basics of this space, and whoever was chosen as the nonprofit would be expected to do anything specific inside the space that they needed for their operations, is kind of how I was thinking of this too. So I don't think it changes our cost. It might change the cost for whoever moves in, whether it's something that can be done during construction or has to be retrofitted afterwards.
Do we have any sense of what other nonprofits might be interested in using the space and how they might use it?
We actually don't know.
Yeah, I'd say the bike library is interested, and then we've probably over the last couple of years had two or three other maybe suitable nonprofits that may work. I don't know what their financial capacity would be to particularly build out the space. But Artifactory is one that's approached the council over the years looking for a permanent space in the downtown area. I would presume that they would be interested in this type of space. But we would strongly recommend that it's a complementary use to the rec center. So when we talk about nonprofits, at least in my mind, bike library, maker space that has a rec center tie to it, whereas more of a social service agency, it's not really what we'd be looking at here.
You want to think of this will be a fairly large open space, so that's why either those, the maker space or the bike library, seems to be a really good fit because you'll have high ceilings and it'll be a fairly large open area to work in. So.
Can I jump in here?
Sure.
So I basically have 3 comments, and the rest of it I'm pretty neutral on, and I'll go along with the group. But the first thing is, in terms of the proposed nonprofit, I strongly feel that we should support the bike library at the outset. I think in part because it's such a nearly perfect fit for this particular location. And while I'm familiar that maybe there could be other nonprofits that could possibly utilize it, I think the bike library is uniquely situated. First of all, to Susan's point, I think the bike library has a well-established fundraising track record and operational history. They've been around for a significant period of time. I'm very confident that they would be able to assist us with fundraising. Second, they have a historic presence downtown. Up until about 4 or 5 years ago, they were at their old John Wilson sporting goods store, and they did a wonderful job of utilizing that space, recycling bikes, those sorts of things. It aligns with our carbon reduction goals in terms of reducing our auto usage, and to do that, to provide low-cost bikes, which is their mission, I think is terrific. 4, it has a community policing function to it with what we've done with our bike program that we can connect to the farmers market as well as our local foods. I actually got my own bike from the bike library once when I was at farmers market, and happened to run into Morrow Heck, and here I am having the same bike 4 years later. So I just think there are so many really unique aspects to that particular entity. And of course, we would have to get into the particulars, assuming that if we were able to get direction for the bike library, we could see whether that would work out or they could actually carry through on fundraising. But I'm very confident they could. They're a very well-run organization. Bathroom, supportive of the inclusive concept. I would like to get a sense of what the cost is. So if as we all know, bathrooms in other contexts can be extraordinarily expensive. So I really would, before making the final decision, really like to get some cost parameters to that. And finally, with the kitchen, hallelujah, that is so awesome. We really, really needed, for all the work that I've done and other people have done on this table, that has been a huge need. With the kitchen that we currently have just doesn't work for social events. And I think so to get a kitchen that's adjacent to the social space is sorely overdue, and I can't wait for events to be hosted there once that space is available. The only comment, if possible, to maybe upgrade it a little bit, you mentioned the commissary concept. There is a real need for commissary-style kitchens. Whether we could partner with other organizations that need that type of facility, I would at least evaluate that if the budget allows. Other than that, I think everything looks good. I think to Jeff's point about, do we want to maybe even have a grander design? Of course, we'd always like grander, bigger, better. But I think in terms of where we are in terms of the budget, I'm very comfortable with where staff has identified before in terms of making this investment without taxing the budget.
I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to my comment, Rockne.
Well,
I was just asking timing and money, and I'm not.
But to your point to answer your question then, in terms of money in the financial component to various variables, that's an important aspect. And I think that we'll be able to have the nonprofit hopefully have some fundraising component when they're, and I think Bike Library is not uniquely, but they have a track record on that, so I'm confident that they could do that.
I think there's been a lot of support for them, but I think in all fairness to all the nonprofits out there that have any relationship to recreational activities, I think we need to put some sort of announcement, application process or something out to everybody, and not have it kind of predetermined and have people come back later and say, hey, wait a minute, we would love to have had an opportunity for that space, but we didn't know anything about that it was even available. We may very well come back to the bike library, but I just think from a process standpoint, we need to really reach out and give other people an opportunity to express their interest and potentially financial viability of building out the space and or continuing to rent afterwards. I'll come back to the other issues afterwards.
Susan, what are you imagining we would ask them in these requests for proposals? How detailed, how thorough, that kind of thing?
Well, I think staff could answer that question a whole lot better than I could, but I think just on first blush, I would say, one, are you even interested? Here's the space that would be available. you'd have to be open basically the same hours that the rec building is, because there's not going to be a bathroom available, so that would be a limitation. You would have an external entrance. So, one, do you have any interest? Number two, what is your mission? Is it related to recreational services? Because that is our number one priority. What are your funding capabilities, because there would be some costs associated with building out the space? And then if we are assuming that they are also going to provide some ongoing rental income for the space to the city, then what is their capability to rent the space?
Yeah, I think that would be a just first blush for a start. I mean, it would seem like this would be similar to RFP, where we would solicit potential. We'd have some criteria that we'd like to move forward. Using all the points really Susan just mentioned, especially highlighting considerations that we know are deficiencies within the space, a la bathroom, time of day, and other things. I would also mention, going back to our strategic plan, focusing on the diverse element. How are you, again, in the same sense that the rec center is as well, catering to diverse populations, just to make sure that that's a part of the conversation as well. I mean, I think that these are things off the top of my head. I think that ultimately, it'd be better to have a separate conversation from that. But I do think that, we could ultimately quickly put together criteria that we could have some type of RFP process.
If you would like that.
I'm inclined to go with the generic box space, option one. I think the bike library has a very compelling case for sure. But I think just on the matter of fairness, I think it's necessary to put the word out, see what we get back. So that's, and I think we've laid out, at least preliminarily, what how we could frame it.
I just want to talk about the kitchen. I just really hoping if the kitchen can be like, I know that maybe you guys thinking about just small kitchen that people can serve the food from for the event, but I really have this idea if we can have little kitchen on the rec center that have a license to cook at, because I know a lot of family who are really good on cooking, but they cannot have a license in their house, and because it have to be a separate kitchen. And also I know the crisis center have one, but it's always busy. But if the city can do something like this, so our immigrant family and low income, they can have another sort. Even the nonprofit event, sometimes they have a member that they can cook. They can just come and rent the space and cook there for the event. I guess if that will be like an idea to think about, it will be great, because we're going to help a lot of people in the community.
I would agree.
One thing to keep in mind, if you're not familiar, we do have a full-scale commercial kitchen in the senior center, and if you haven't seen it, we can certainly arrange for some tours. It's largely unused and has been since Elder Services moved out of there 4 or 5 years ago, but it used to be where all the Meals on Wheels were prepared and cooked. Again, it's largely not used for anything but serving anymore. They don't cook there. And we've really struggled at the senior center to figure out how to use that space. We've explored some different options, but nothing's really stuck. So if the idea is something that's unrelated to the adjacent use of the social hall, like a test kitchen for entrepreneurs or whatever it may be, we might want to consider what we have there now and focus the rec center side on the complementary use to the social hall. Not to say that you couldn't do both, but commercial kitchens are very, very expensive to build. And if we have one that's unused right now, I think we should focus on that.
Hey Jeff, to that extent, what's the adjacent space? So I know the commercial
The
kitchen.
assembly room.
Is it similar to the size of the social hall?
Yes.
Not as large,
Yeah.
but close.
Okay.
And that's one of the challenges with using the kitchen at the senior centers, because the senior centers program so much, and it is directly adjacent to the assembly room. You can have some conflicting uses that come
Yeah, it really doesn't matter as long as we have one available for the community to use. It doesn't matter if it will be in the rec center or the senior center. Yeah.
So it might be worth working with the director of the senior center or acting director of the senior center to see if there's some trial use of the kitchen that would fit with what Maz has in mind. I don't know, but we wouldn't want to just leap full bore into it, but we could just check it out.
Yeah. As long as we have one existed, we don't need to spend money on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea and a good use of the senior center, too.
There may be some complications, just because some appliances will need repairs before we could use it full scale. The walk-in the freezer is not operational. The group that uses it now for serving doesn't need it, so we've decided to shut it down. So we need to make some repairs if we are going to use it, but we can absolutely explore what that could look like.
Yeah, we can just spend a little money there so we can have like kitchen for the public. Yeah.
I'm sure they would like to see it used more fully, but
of course, yeah.
we'll just have to see.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, good.
Well, I'm in favor of the open box plan, and particularly leaning towards the bike library, but I do like Susan's comments about opening it up for proposals, but establishing some criteria to gauge the interest also in that space. If it turns out that the bike library is the only one, then so be it. But if there are others, then gauging how it's going to fit and weld in with the rec center and your mission.
Well, it sounds like there's considerable support for that, so that's probably the direction we need to move. I'd like to suggest that we want to make sure that we aren't saying, let's open things up to get brief proposals from a variety of nonprofits, knowing that we want to install the bike library there. So we have to make sure we have an open mind about that.
I'd agree.
Right.
Yes.
Regarding the other remodeling, I guess depending, not knowing all the dollars involved, I guess my tendency for priority would be on the pool area locker rooms. It seems like over the last 2 or 3 years we've had just a number of complaints about accessibility, and you mentioned, Julie, parent with opposite gender child, and kids get to a certain age that they're uncomfortable and other people are uncomfortable with a boy of a certain age going into the women's locker room, or a father trying to take a daughter and no place really to go. So a lot of other things I'd like to see done. But again, given costs and what other constraints, I think that would be my first priority. And I if we're not giving up the number of spaces in terms of showers and toilets and that sort of thing, I really like this concept. I think you've got closed doors, you've got that hallway. I think people could and should be very comfortable in terms of being able to use that.
I agree. Currently, no offense, but it just seems sort of dark and dingy, and I've always disliked kind of using that room to use the pool. Right. So, and the new design, it looks so open, and kudos to you for planning that, because that looks very nice.
I think we have a number of questions that need to be answered before we make this final decision, but we just needed to know, is that an idea you're open to? Because it is so different than what we've done in the past.
I did have some questions, Julie, though, in the information that was given. There were a number of safety issues that I thought are really high priority. That even mentioned some vinyl tile on the ground floor has known asbestos in it, and those kinds of things, and breaker issues and lighting. No lack of sprinklers, the outside railing ramp that the anchors are corroding, and
So
will that be incorporated somehow in whatever plan you choose then? Or?
Yeah, that's an older report.
Okay.
So a number of those
Some
things
of those have been
ticked
updated.
off throughout the years, and with each project we do as much of that as we can. So a fair amount of those have been taken care of. The railing outside, the tile in the lower level, no, we have not, because as long as it is fastened to the ground, the asbestos isn't an issue.
Right.
It's only if we decide to, and we have gotten quotes a couple times to do that, and have not done that yet. But all those things are on our watch list, and we are incorporating them each year as we do other projects. A little bit of lighting here, a little bit of this. The things that we have proposed for the next phase are things we could tackle in larger chunks that I think make sense. Yeah.
I would agree as well. My only question, I think, is, what's been spoken about before as far as related to cost. And so obviously, if it's some exorbitant cost, I think we need to reconsider what that would look like. But also, so I know we talked about the pool area as well. Is that a part of this, or?
In the final part of this memo, it says that there will need to be a separate project for the swimming pool in the future, primarily for the kind of the guts of the swimming pool, the pumps, the filtration system. That is also nearing, it's an older building, that's nearing the end of its useful life as well. So you will be looking at a fairly substantial project for the swimming area. We have it, I think, for 2022 right now, kind of penciled in for that. But so the only thing this does with the swimming pool area is address the locker rooms and that on-deck restroom.
One question I have is, we're being asked to choose one or the other. What's, for the one that if we were to not, as this is set up, we would not be choosing one of these two options, when would it be phased in? What's the timeline
That
on?
would be my question for you. But actually, I'm not actually asking you to make a choice tonight. I'm asking for your priorities or how would you like us to make the decision between the two when we have the full information? Obviously, budget is one of the concerns. We're not sure the price of those lower level restrooms. Whatever we do, we want to be able to pair it with our top priorities, which are the racquetball game room space and the on-deck restroom. So that right there will probably limit which of the two. But just to get a sense of upstairs, downstairs, which one seems like a higher public priority to you?
Because I'm personally having a little trouble prioritizing them. I know the kitchen, the catering kitchen concept, I think is something that sounds quite valuable. Not to mention, we saw the staff offices. They're kind of shoehorned into places where it's really not practical for using as office space. So I don't know. It all, I don't know what the overall cost of the projects, if we were to do everything, would be, and if it's necessary to phase them, but.
And we'll certainly find that out as we go through the first phase of this. Our list is long. I realize that. We've been knocking. Jeff keeps, I say that every day. I'm like, I have so much I want to get done. I have so much. He says, you've got to bite it off little by little. And we've been trying, and we are, and we will continue. We're trying to get enough planning done so we have realistic price and estimates on all of this so that you can help us plan for beyond this phase. Because there are areas we haven't touched yet within the building. And as the use continues to go up, I think there's things that we will want to continue improving to make it even a better public space. So.
You're kind of getting an inside view to our budget meetings. These are the discussions that we have, and we struggle over these just as you are. And this is just one facility. We could go to Mercer and give you a similar list there. We could go to pretty much every park and give you similar lists. So, what's in the budget right now? I don't have it in front of me. I'm going off memory here, but we have this project in the budget. When we won't be able to do everything, we'll get as much done as we can, and then we have the big pool project in 2022. I believe is correct. Outside of that, we have an annual rec center improvements line item that's fairly minimal that allows us to check the boxes of really small issues that come up and maybe some accessibility issues like handrails and fixtures and that sort of thing. But we won't be able to do all this, and there's not another line in the budget as of right now to take that next step, because we feel that next step really needs to be as Julie said, the guts of the pool.
One question we haven't talked about that I want to make sure we get an answer from too is during the budget process, you wanted us to also do a feasibility study for a second story or an additional story. And we're wondering if there's more information there, more direction on that part of the.
So I know that was me, or maybe I'll say it was Jim, during the budget process, really wanting to, and I don't want to talk super long about it, but I feel like one of our things that we need to value the most, especially in an ever-expanding city, is our space. And I feel like the Recreation Center has an opportunity to expand outwards, and I don't know northwest, whatever, or I guess it's not north, but east, west, whatever that direction it is, to have that expansion outward into the parking lot in general. But I think I also talked about wanting to expand up as well. I'm not talking 12 stories, but I'm talking, 1 or 2 stories, again, to accommodate, and I appreciate maybe the setup. I don't think Jim and Pauline talked to me about this, but, we just had a conversation recently, albeit, with not many members of the Black community, but some members of the Black community, talking about the desire for more space. I do think this is an opportunity, and I know there's other pieces of the project that do provide it for an additional community space as well, but I do think it provides an opportunity to have an additional space or more space for community usage. And I'm not just focused on, just Black families. I think it's a part of our entire diverse community that could potentially use this space in different ways. I know we talked about, and briefly from an entrepreneurial standpoint, how this also could be used as kind of an experimental space for a lot of our diverse community members that work out of their homes with clothing, jewelry, and other projects that just need an opportunity to do something and have space to do that. And I think some of the economic development staff are working on some of those things, and there's a thing in the parking lot over on the southeast side. So things are happening, but again, going back to that space piece, I think there's an opportunity that I don't want us to limit. And just, I might be maybe thinking like this year, but if we're able to do some type of study, I know this speaks to the parking lot, but I'm actually thinking about going up as well. I do think it provides an opportunity that I do not want to pass on, at least from a planning standpoint. Maybe not necessarily next year.
So just-
Additionally,
it's-
basketball courts.
I knew that was coming. So a preliminary study that just gives us some really basic cost estimates and makes sure that nothing that we're doing with the racquetball game room area would preclude us from doing something in the future. Is that a fair way to state it?
I'm expanding, right?
Correct.
Julie, could you clarify the previous study that we did, that it anticipated the expansion coming out onto the parking lot? That was from the gym?
Yeah, that is in the 2012 study. I actually don't have a lot of information. I don't know if Kumi or Chad, either one.
Yeah, so there's one that talks about 2012.
So in the 2012 study, when it looked at, was a facilities review and also a master plan study for the whole city and looking at a variety of different facilities. One of the things that suggested in that was to expand over the parking lot and still have the parking spaces below, but also having potential future recreation space. There was some concern in that study about being able to expand up. So, but it was a pretty limited review.
Up over the existing building?
That's correct. So in the study, what it recommended was to, if we were to look at expanding, was to look at expanding to the east of the gym presently and over that existing parking lot.
I don't get that. You mean like on the top of the area that's existing building or on the parking lot
So
if we extend it?
It would be
Because
almost-
nothing on the parking lot right now, right?
Right, so you would
But-
look out over that parking lot, would be almost like building a parking ramp over the top of it, but it would be
And-
building space instead of parking. So a second level with parking underneath, or, does that make more
Okay.
sense?
Sure, yeah.
The existing parking is in the floodplain, is it not?
Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
so that would have to remain. Yeah, that's fairly the parking areas are, based on my estimate, almost 0.8 acres. I mean, it's a sizable amount of land. It's about half the site, it looked like. So that seemed very promising. And I don't know what level of discussion has taken place in terms of thinking about.
I think it was
that.
very preliminary at that time, so.
I guess I would support that as long as the cost to do that additional study wouldn't be too expensive.
We included it in the scope of
Okay.
our contract with
Let's do it.
architects, yeah.
Well, at one point, and I'm not, Kumi, I need your help on this, but at one point, roughly 4 or 5 years ago, there was some developer interest in building I can't remember how tall the proposal was, let's say 8 stories, I don't remember, an 8-story building next to the bridge, the College Street Bridge, over the parking lot, with the parking lot being used as parking space and maybe another floor parking, I don't remember. But then above it, a mixed-use facility of some kind. Were you referring to that just when you talked about the master plan? All right, thanks. So Kumi's shaking her head no. So anyhow, I just, I couldn't
Yeah,
remember
that's-
whether that was.
That's nothing
something
we're
you-
considering anymore.
Right,
But-
okay.
So if, in your, what we sent out, the packet information, there is the study from, I guess it doesn't have, the RDG study, and the 3 pages from the end has the drawing that shows what they were considering.
Thanks.
And it's basically one basketball court that would come out to the east.
Well, I guess I don't see any harm in doing sort of an exploratory study about the cost associated with going up 1 floor above the existing building. But the more we think about adding space there, either by going up or going out over the parking lot, we're talking about more time, and there are going to be lots of things unfold around here that will be affecting what kind of services we would want to provide there. That would affect what kind of services we would want to provide there, and even how much parking we would need. I don't want to get too ahead of the game here, but so I think a preliminary study would be appropriate, but only preliminary. Do you hear some clarity from us up here? Okay.
Yeah, I think we have what we need.
Yeah, okay. Is there anything else we should process that would be helpful to you?
I think we've gotten the feedback that we need to move forward at this point, so.
So what we'll probably do, and I want to talk with Julie and her staff, as we get through the process with OPN and we develop our recommendation, we'll certainly come back to you, have that discussion. I think what you're really going to need to look at is, you're probably going to have that expansion discussion again. If we're not able to go up for whatever reason, and our only option is to go out, then you'll need to know that. You'll need to know what you're doing, what the city's going to be doing with that racquetball space may impact our ability to expand outwards. And we won't really know that until we get deeper into the analysis. In regards to the selection of the nonprofit, I don't think that's anything we need to jump into right away. We'll talk about process and questions to ask, and we'll check in with you one more time before we go out, just to make sure we're asking the right questions and framing it the way in which you want us to.
I would think a request for proposals from nonprofits should not be burdensome for them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, good deal. Thank you, Julie.
We are excited to move forward. I just want to say that. I mean, everything we get to do in that building, it is being used by the public. It's fun to see them in there every day. So thank you very much.
Yeah. And thank you, Justin and Josh and Kumi. It's good to see you all again. You too, Chad. Okay, we can move on to the next item, which is clarification of agenda items. Who needs clarity?
Can we pull agenda item 4E5 for separate consideration?
Maybe. What is
Was
it?
it 4E5?
Mormon Trek.
4D5?
4E or
What is
4D?
it?
I meant 4E,
The Mormon Trek.
the Mormon Trek. Sure.
Sure. And how's it been revised? I see that it has been.
I believe it's just the project name.
Oh,
And the only reason is to highlight and make a couple of comments. That's it.
Thought you were going to vote against it.
Huh?
A couple.
Yeah, just a couple.
just going to say something about
I got a couple.
Yeah,
your stuff. All right, I got to make
Do
sure.
you want us to, we'll just come up and Ron or Jason can give you a quick overview of what that project is, and you can state what you need or ask questions, and
I mean, if you want to, yeah. I mean, it was more, I mean, I know you've talked about it before, and so I don't want to rehash it. I just wanted to pull it to maybe more highlight it for the community and make a couple of comments.
We don't have to pull it. They can just do that during the consent calendar, and then we can vote on the whole thing. I mean, you can highlight, you don't have to vote on it separately. I mean, you can if you want.
That's fine. I can do it during the consent part of the
Yeah.
agenda, too.
All right.
Okay.
I'll do that. So you got to make sure I don't move too
Yeah, that's what I
quickly
was-
on that, get votes, and then suddenly you can't say anything.
Calendar we got to talk about.
If you see me starry-eyed not saying anything, just let
I just want to ask you, if I want to comment on item that on the consent agenda, can I do it like during the,
During discussion.
Just
So,
discussion?
there's a motion to approve and then a second and
Sure.
then discussion. And so you can bring up any of the items there.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right,
Just identify the item.
okay,
Say, I don't know, 4E5 or whatever
Sure.
the number is.
all right, thanks, good deal.
You really want to pull the item if you want to have a dissenting vote, if you want to vote against it, or if you've got questions that
No,
you think
just
would be
a comment.
beneficial.
Yeah.
If it's just a comment, then
Comment and suggestion, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like,
Can we do that now?
yeah.
Or, yeah, discussion.
Yeah, it's not like a voting or anything, yeah.
Now, in the end, you will be voting up or down for
Yes,
the whole consent.
For the whole
calendar.
consent agenda, yeah.
Right.
No, that's fine.
Okay, other items?
I just have a question on rationale on 4D7, and Kelly, this has no negative repercussions on you. This is on the city clerk contract amendment. I was just curious why maybe we weren't looking at making this adjustment over a number of years to gradually bring the maximum back down in line with other administrative positions. I fully understand and support that Kelly and the rest of the people in the office have done an outstanding job, and Kelly has not been able to take vacation and has accrued probably a lot of additional vacation from the time Marion left to they were understaffed and then getting up to speed on her job. I guess my question is, why are we leaving this so that the maximum payment, it's leaving it up at 320 hours instead of, say, over the next 5 years, bringing that maximum down to match the rest of the administrative? It just seems like me that would be a little more logical.
Well, the city manager has a contract that has a different level of vacation payout, so it's not an unusual thing to do, so we just kind of use that as a model.
Okay, I guess I just misinterpreted the first sentence. I was making the assumption that they were all more in line, so, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
I think all three of ours are probably different
they are.
currently.
Okay.
I have more vacation.
Okay, I withdraw my comments.
I wanted to comment on that item, just to say that I hope we can give her some vacation soon, particularly maybe in June when, we're not having any meetings in June, so hopefully you could take some time then soon.
Yeah.
Much deserved time.
Am I right in understanding there are no cost implications?
Potentially at the end of employment, you're increasing the
Another 20
The
years,
payout.
30 years
It
down
would be
the
the
road.
payout.
actually.
All the vacation hours get bought out, so if you exceed your cap, she would get paid, just like any other employee for those vacation hours. If you can accrue more, there's a chance if you keep that accrual high, when you separate employment, you're going to be paying out that vacation at a higher wage rate. The difference is probably fairly minimal, but you'd be paying a little bit more.
Okay. Other questions?
I was going to bring up correspondence, if that's okay, Jim?
Well,
at a later
maybe we
time.
could hold off. I know I have a couple questions about, the specific items, so let me
Just
do
flag it
them, I
for me.
guess, and see if there are others. So anyhow, item 4D1, Chief Greer, this is really a question about the strategic plan for the fire department. So, yeah, it looks like a good plan and everything. I see, so I don't have any criticism of it, really. But one thing I noticed, is that I did not see any explicit reference towards sustainability and about what the fire department is doing to further our sustainability objectives. So let me say a little bit more related to that. I think the whole idea of protecting the city, neighborhoods, houses, et cetera, from fire damage is part of sustainability. So everything you do is directly related to it in that sense. But in other ways, I don't see anything in the strategic plan related to sustainability. For example, anything having to do with carbon emission reductions. Of course, if you don't have any fires, you're reducing carbon emissions. But you understand. So
Absolutely.
So I would hope that I don't know, in my ideal version, there might be an addendum to the strategic plan indicating how you see that the fire department could help advance those sustainability objectives. And I think you've already been doing some work related to it with regard to the climate action plan and development of it, but I don't know. I don't know if you've had that conversation.
Yeah, we can certainly, we look at it every year. Actually, we look at it all the time, but we do an update with the spring planning meeting, and that's certainly something we can work into our sessions that we do.
Probably one of the biggest ones is past the strategic plan now, and that is, I mean, Fire Station 4 was LEED certified, so, I mean, that was a big deal at the
Certainly
time.
in 2, yeah.
And the
Yeah.
rebuild of 2, so.
Yes.
Certainly, they've done a lot. My guess is you're not going to do a whole lot with those fire engines on sustainability.
Yeah, we're certainly cognizant of what you're talking about. And
What do they get, about 0.3 miles per gallon?
you don't want to pay the bill, that's fair. No, but point taken, we will certainly look at that.
I was thinking also about equity in terms of trying to diversify the mix of employees in the fire department.
Yes.
And I know there's reference to that as an ambition within the strategic plan, your strategic plan. But we take it very seriously, and I'm sure you know that. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those camps that we're focusing on, we're trying to get to folks when they're younger. And we're certainly looking at ways that we advertise our openings and trying to reach a greater population. Across Iowa, our requirements for testing are minimal: 18 driver's license, high school graduation. So we try to get as many folks to apply as we can. So we will continue our efforts in working with Karen and her staff to make sure that we get the word out far and wide.
Yeah, good deal.
I was happy to see kind of your stress on safety and well-being of the community, as well as the safety and continuing education of your firefighters. So I think that's a good thing, and I'm excited that in our budget we're going to have that new training tower for you. So I'm excited for that to happen.
We're excited as well.
Yes, so that's good.
Any other questions for Chief Greer? Thanks.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah. I have another agenda item. Do you mind if I go into that? So item 4D5, this is the resolution pertaining to McAllister, the engineering services contract. So my question really is one of timing and coordination. I'm wondering where in the process the consultant will be coordinating with Opticos. Because Opticos, I don't know, beginning after July 1, will be developing form-based code. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't give you that answer now because Opticos isn't under contract. As soon as we could get them on board, we'll make sure they're talking, and we have the benefit of the previous Opticos study that the AECom, who's doing the McAllister Boulevard design for us, they will have, and they'll be able to reference that previous work. But they can't really collaborate with Opticos until we get them under contract. From a timing standpoint, I think there's ample time. I'm looking at Jason and Ron. We do hope to get Opticos to you in a proposal for an agreement with them in July at some point. So, the design of this roadway is going to take place in the fall and the winter to be bid out and constructed next year.
Okey-doke. Thanks.
I had a question on 4E4, the Melrose Avenue fiber optic extension. Since it extends through portions of University Heights, do they benefit from that at all? And if so, would they be obligated to help fund it?
That's a good question.
Don't-
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, there's a piece of that.
Oh,
He got back to you.
yeah.
As a part of our agreement with University Heights, they would have the ability to use the fiber, but there would be a separate agreement besides what we're already allowing for the use of the right-of-way. So if they would want to use the fiber, there would be another agreement that we'd have to have with them for that use.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
On 4E3, which is the Creekside Park Improvement Project, and a public hearing on a request for bids, I was a little confused about whether the cost, the $563,000 cost was for the base scope of the bid only, or whether it included the 6 alternates or, part of the 6 alternates or whatever.
We think it's just the base. Yeah, just the base.
All right, well, that answers my question. Thanks. All right, any other questions about core items in the consent calendar, or on the agenda? Rockne?
Yeah, so correspondence, whenever Mary Gravitt writes, I always pay very close attention, in addition to all the other ones. But I wasn't particularly concerned about the profane language at the Iowa City Public Library. Don't know the age of the people involved, but it seems like there's been young people. We've had an issue with having alternative spaces, and I think this sort of underscores the need for that. So I don't know if, Jeff, if you could comment, how has it been at the library lately in terms of disciplinary issues or what's being done? Because it's certainly, we're trying to balance 2 different needs here. I think one, the need for a quiet library, and the other thing is underscores a need for teens to have a place where they can enjoy, and of course enjoy the library too, as long as they respect the rules on that. But that does concern me in terms of what she identified.
Sure. So when we had our staff meeting last week, Susan Craig had addressed this issue and responded to it. As far as we're aware, no staff person was alerted to these things occurring, in which case, we were assured that library staff would have addressed it at the time. And then the second component of that, apparently they were described as not just young people, but just a general non-observance of
I can actually
library
jump on this
quiet.
one because they came from the rec center and then went to the library. In that case, it was adults. It was an adult couple having an argument with each other.
Okay.
They'd been kicked out of the rec center and continued that behavior in the lobby of the library. So.
We haven't heard yet any concerns about disciplinary issues, as there
There's been no uptick that you've been able to identify?
No,
Okay.
I haven't heard that. We may experience a difference in activity at the library, especially as we go and roll into summer programs, that it'll get busy. So we'll just have to keep our ear to the ground and see what that looks like.
Anything else about agenda items?
Again, on correspondence, I was touched by the letter from the parent of one of the students that received the student award. I don't think in all my time I've been on the council, we've been giving those awards. That's one of my favorite things to do, but I don't think we've ever received such a formal thank you for it, and that really touched me. That was nice.
Yeah, it was very sweet.
I was pleased to see the Gary Klein 4F9 mentioning the pedestrian, not pleased in that he was mentioning the traffic fatalities, but that it was on he was conscious of it. It's something that I know I've been emphasizing on council, and, it really, for this thing to gain traction, it's going to require, in my view, the understanding and concern on the part of the community as a whole. So seeing that, that may be something people are becoming more concerned with.
Yeah.
Right. All right, want to move ahead to the info packets? May 3rd.
Quickly, before we jump to that, the rest of the agenda, I did have a question. On the rezonings, I had heard via the grapevine, and I don't know if there's any truth to this, that one of the 5 property owners for the historic landmark designation that had not protested previously had since protested. Is there any truth to that?
Right.
There were questions that they had, and my understanding is they met with staff this afternoon and resolved those so that they are not going to make object. That
Object
It
to-
wouldn't have been counted as a protest for supermajority purposes, but that's my understanding.
It's correct.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure, Jim, you kind of jumped from correspondence to the info packets. Did anybody have any question on any of the rest of the agenda items?
Oh, I don't know. I asked that question several times, so I don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
you'd kind of gone through it in order, and I just wanted to make sure that people had that chance. All right, fine.
Well, I'm not hearing anything about the May 3rd info packet, so how about May 10?
Is it May 10? Okay. Yeah, for May 10, I would like to ask about IB5. You know, I know that you guys met with the group. Who is those groups? CEDAC? What that group?
Hold on. Sorry, about IP5, is that what you said?
Uh-huh.
So ask the question again.
I guess group of you guys went met with them. I just want to know what the group, like CEDAC group.
CDAC.
What's that?
It's, I can't remember the acronym off the top of my head now.
I don't remember the acronym, so.
Okay.
There was a Refugee Alliance
Yeah.
that was there, as well as Joan Vandenberg from the school district and Colleen from Kirkwood.
You mean the group is like the member, those the member that you're telling me about, from Kirkwood and from the refugees, member of that group, or?
I'm not sure what
So-
acronym you're,
Yeah, so
oh,
it's
okay,
in
down,
the-
way down, okay, see on the bottom of page
It's-
one, CEDAC.
Yeah, so CDAC is Community Education Advisory Council. I believe it's the group that Joan Vandenberg is associated with, and she was a part of that meeting, as well as other members. She also plays a dual role because she's with other members as far as the Refugee Alliance as well. And so that's where that CDAC came from. That was from one of the participants that wasn't from Jim.
Sure.
So let me say a little bit more about that particular info packet and the email that I sent, and which conveyed an email from Colleen Schmidt and had those two reports. I didn't realize the way they were going to appear in print, so the key report was what was titled the Issue Brief Educational Access for LEP Adults in Iowa City, and the other was more, it was related but not directly focused on what our conversation had to do with. So I thought, Susan, you and Kingsley can say whatever, tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I thought it was a really good, fruitful conversation. And the main point that I got from it is that adult learners of English are having a lot of trouble finding accessible, reasonable cost places where they can get the kind of training they need to learn how to converse in English and then be able to get jobs, et cetera, by having that kind of ability to speak English well enough. So Colleen presented us with ideas about what could possibly be done. We discussed that at length. And I think the bottom line we came up with was that it would be helpful to co-convene a cluster of stakeholders who could begin talking about what could be done to help adult learners of English.
English, yeah.
So how we would proceed, I don't know. In fact, that was the question I was going to ask you is, do you have advice about how we should proceed? And I hadn't had a chance to talk with Jeff about it either. But it seems pretty clear that there's a significant problem for a significant number of our residents, and that we should be involved in coming up with a solution to that problem. But we can't do it by ourselves. So hence the idea of co-convening something with other stakeholders, like the school district, like Kirkwood, like, I don't know, the county, I don't know who else. So do any of you have ideas about how we could proceed? Kingsley, you and Susan and I haven't really had a chance to talk about that since we held the meeting.
Well, my takeaway from the meeting was that Joan and some of the others there were going to start working on trying to co-convene something. They were going to reach out to Mark Nolte at ICAD and some other people that we had mentioned. So I guess I was kind of the mind of sitting back and waiting to hear from Joan and others who might be trying to get something like that organized. So I think we talked about a lot of different resources, and clearly the fact that this is not, as you said, Jim, this is not something that the city can do, or nor is it our responsibility, but we certainly are interested in trying to help work on the problem and find ways to coordinate with others. So I think Joan was kind of taking the lead on making some of those contacts.
Yeah, I think that was happening, trying to develop a stakeholder group to discuss these issues more in depth. I think that for me, a more clearly articulated plan as far as, I think that the need, you kind of articulated already, was, how do we incorporate a more diverse workforce when we have individuals or community that have so much talent that isn't being utilized. And, one of the ways to do that is providing training and classes to that end. But there were some other comments, or there was a long list of additional things, childcare and some other stuff that I think, again, what is the focus? And I think that that part I would want to see a little bit more clearly drawn out, just so before we kind of go into a little bit deeper conversation, we know kind of where we need to be involved.
I just would like to suggest that we include like some people who already start doing something like this, but not necessarily they have the capacity or the funding or the resources for like many people in the community, because they can serve only few people, such as some Kyrgyz, the International Women Group. They doing fantastic job, but sometimes they do it only 1 day, 2 days is not enough. And the Center for Worker Justice also, they doing English classes, and if we can involve those people, because they already started, but not necessarily they doing like really covering all the community or like reaching out to all of them, because they don't have that capacity to do so.
I think part of what they want to do is kind of get a database of who's doing what, and not start from scratch, but utilize those that are already working and figure out how to fill the gaps and add
that would be a great
capacity.
idea.
And we talked the fact that childcare and transportation were also issues, not just the classes themselves, but the accessibility in a number of different ways.
Yeah, I just would like to really, show a support for the step that you guys take to do this and try to help the people navigate.
So I'm wondering if it would be helpful to have one of us, reach out to Joan Vandenberg and Colleen Schmidt and sort of be the link, temporarily at least, between what they're doing. Like you said, Susan, I'd forgotten that particular part of our conversation. So that we're remaining in contact with them and finding a way to move ahead, rather than simply sort of passively waiting.
Well, why don't we tell them that we're interested in what their feedback and suggestions are, and in working with them in an ongoing process in terms of recommendations, and they can come back to us with additional recommendations that we can more effectively serve.
I don't think they're coming back with recommendations, Rockne. I think it's more, at this point, co-convening a lot of different stakeholders, and I think we should be a part of that convening to make sure that they're not just giving us recommendations, but we are a part of building any of those recommendations.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Yeah,
I'm not volunteering. I'll tell you that right now. My calendar is full. Between the Access Center, now they've asked me to be on the executive committee as well as the steering committee and everything else. I can't add another thing. I'm comfortable with the fact that Joan was starting to pull this together and would get back to us. But if you want somebody to be reaching out more actively and doing that, it's going to have to be somebody other than me.
Well, that goes, my second point is down the drain. So my first point, I do think they have a little more work to do. Not to put Maz on the spot, if Maz, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that we need to set up that liaison just yet. I'm more interested in how they're collaborating with other entities. I mean, my first thought process is, obviously it was talking about training. There was some conversation about funding, which is, I think, why primarily we're there as well. I would love to see just a schedule as far as what the classes are and what the training is currently happening across the city/county to just get a better understanding of, where the needs currently exist. Could it be that people who have been working on this need additional resources? I mean, this is one of those, partnership conversations that I know Susan's talked about in the past, and I've tried to mention as well, as far as, different groups, I think, get into situations where there's different areas of need around a focused group, and it's really a larger, potentially systemic problem, and that other entities are working on, and then we may support this organization, but this organization hasn't seen to support. I want to see more of a connection, because I guess looking at it from a workforce standpoint, I think it's very beneficial to our community, and I definitely think we should step in. And I think that from just in general, how do we activate more employment opportunities in general for people that are here? I think it's awesome, especially from a diverse standpoint. But I would say that they need to just do a little bit more work as far as connecting the dots a little bit. And I would say, going back to Rockney's point, we would say we thank you for sharing the information. We're considering your request. We'd like to see you reach out to other diverse stakeholders and get some more information and provide a more clarified need, and then come back to us with more information. I think we could leave it on them to come back to us with more information instead of having a liaison. I do think Maj should reach out and say, hey, here's some other groups that are part of this conversation that need to be a part of this conversation as well. I just think we're too far. It's too early. Just want to wait. From a project management standpoint, they're here, we're here. I just want them to be right here so we can be closer. Thinking of like Hitch.
I agree.
All right, well, I can write Colleen and Joan and say, hey, keep us posted on what you've been able to do in terms of identifying other stakeholders and taking further steps. Yeah. Okay. Anything else in the May 10 packet? Listening posts, February 8, the IP number 8. So we plan to hold a listening post in May. May's half over. So
I just didn't know, location.
Yeah, so you identified two, Farmers Market down here or the former Bacchus Mobile Home Park are two possibilities. There might be others.
Having lived over there previously, I don't know where the person had in mind for Bacchus, which is now actually Kohl's. They have an office space there, which has a lower level, but I guess we'd have to check with Eddie Cole and see where, if there's a space there. I mean, that's an excellent idea, although because the aspect of that is that both of those, what was that term, what was Bacchus, are very heavily populated with Hispanic folks, and it would be nice, but then we perhaps would need a translator too, for them to feel a part of it and express their concerns.
What date were we thinking of?
Well, we had no specific date, but we had,
in May.
sometime in May is what our tentative schedule called for.
Yeah, I would support the mobile home park, and I'd be happy to do it if that will work.
So we'd have to reach out to Eddie Cole, I think, to see if it's okay to come on to the mobile home court, and then try to pin down a date.
I would join Rockney there too.
You said this will be on May or when?
Well, if we could schedule it in May, that'd be great, but it's the 15th already, so maybe it would be early June.
Just hold those for the summer.
If in May, I can do it, but if not, that's it.
Yeah. So I think, Rockney, do I hear you volunteering?
Yeah, me too.
Pauline, I hear you volunteering, so.
I would just be curious if there's others who want to do it. I think, Pauline, you've done
I've done a lot of them.
4 or 5 the last
Because nobody
6,
ever
so-
volunteers, so I say, I'll do it.
I can do it.
Yeah, that's
So Maz is interested.
Maz and Pauline back up.
Yeah, but try to do it like May, the end of May.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll be able to find another person if that's necessary. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
All right, any other items in the May 10 packet?
So I just want to bring up IP7. A lot of people have been reading about the efforts of Faculty Forward, and what I would request is that our mayor submit a letter in support of recognition of Faculty Forward, which for those of you who don't know in the audience, there's a ongoing issue at the University of Iowa related to non-tenure faculty and working conditions for non-tenure faculty who are long-term employees of the University of Iowa. I want to anticipate a couple concerns that people may raise. One, obviously employment issues are very sensitive involving other entities. That said, this does involve a number of people who reside in the city of Iowa City, a major employer. It's been a very public event. And the letter, Jim, you're extremely diplomatic. The letter would be very simple, just to sort of recognize and support both the university and recognizing their tough budget times that they're in. But at the same point, I think it's important that we stand behind organizing efforts, because that's ultimately what this appears to be, organizing efforts of workers throughout the community, whether it's in academia, low-wage workers. They're major issues. So I would ask that we would do this, and I think that we could do it in a very diplomatic. Jim could keep it extremely short. And then ultimately, there's a process in place that will take place, and it would be addressed to President Harold. This has manifested itself. There was a sit-in within the last week. It does appear to be percolating up, and I think it's important that we stand behind the workers, regardless of their educational level, their income level, where they're at, and that we not pick and choose which labor issues we want to get involved in. I think it is appropriate for us as a body to do that. So this would be similar in some respects to the I-380 issue. I don't know whether Jim would want to give us some feedback in terms of a letter, but we'd have to get support from the rest of council before we would authorize the mayor to write such a letter. But I would like us to do that.
I think this is a pretty complicated topic. Was it just today or yesterday in the Press Citizen there was an article about faculty freezes, or freezes on faculty and staff pay at the university? Yep. Plus, the universities just had, the mid-year budget cut, and only part of that was restored for the forthcoming year. And I understand there are considerable variations in opinion among the people who teach at the university. And of course, there are tenure-track professors, there are non-tenure-track teachers and lecturers, adjuncts, et cetera. And I'm absolutely certain that adjuncts and lecturers are underpaid. That's pretty clear and has been clear for quite some time. But it's not clear to me how to resolve that issue. And it's it's its own internal thing too, where the administration and faculty and others in the university have to figure out through their own processes how to proceed. Seems to me.
And I understand that, Jim, but labor issues are always complicated. There's always complications in terms of budget, in terms of these issues. I don't think we have to get into the particulars, but just support of Faculty Forward and the University of Iowa during this process. We wouldn't weigh in any particular topics, and I think we can do that.
I think the minute you write this letter, and I'll give you a little bit of background. I mean, when I was at Kirkwood, I was president of the Faculty Association. I was chief negotiator for a number of years, so I've been there in that labor part. And we were in the same situation. Our part-time faculty were not unionized, and by law they could not unionize. And what we really struggled with was the administration not adding full-time positions, but adding part-time positions. And we also sat there. And we also sat there at the bargaining table looking at what the state was giving Kirkwood for a budget, and knowing that what they were trying to do was keep as many faculty in the classrooms to provide the classes that were being demanded by people trying to attend and get an education. And they were in a real catch-22 situation, which was incredibly crappy for the part-time faculty. And so I get that, and I understand it, and I know a number of people who are in those non-tenure positions, and I've had letters from faculty. I don't feel, as a city council, with particularly, and I think you articulated incredibly well, Jim, as complicated as this is, and the number of different pieces involved with it, that there's any way for us to send a letter that does not absolutely look like us trying to get in the middle of the university's business, where they have a very complicated issue to try and work through. I don't care how diplomatically it's written. I think it is absolutely going to be seen as a criticism of the administration at the University of Iowa. And I think for each of us to express our own views and individual support in ways, I think is fine. I don't think that it should come officially from the council.
What do the rest of you think?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'm very sympathetic. I just, it does seem like a very complex issue that, just to put it on the other foot, if the city were involved in a similar situation, how would we feel if an outside entity were to?
I think they should.
I just don't know what we
Public
would bring
body.
to it. I just don't know if we have any insight. But I certainly sympathize with the situation.
I think you use the word diplomatic, and you're right, Jim is usually very good about that in any sort of communication with anyone. But I think if it was more just simplistic, just encouraging the powers that be to use good faith efforts to work with this group, that if they want to be represented by a union, don't do things to discourage that. We don't have to say, you got to pay them, you got to give them vacation, you got to do their benefits. We don't have to talk about their contract issues, but just saying that use some good faith efforts and work with them on organizing. That's all. But of course, that comes from my organizing blood.
Sure. They're underpaid.
Right.
It's not good. Should be changed.
So I got two.
Yeah, I would agree with Pauline and some of the comments that have been made, and John. I think we're talking about just providing some type of response. I think is important, but not to the level, Rocky, that I think you're speaking about.
I'm satisfied with any letter.
Yeah, I would say to that point. I would say to that point.
Support both parties.
Yeah, I do think we should do a letter. I do think we should weigh in, because I've received some of that communication, and there is a personal part of me. I'm currently an adjunct professor as well, not at the university, so I don't have that conflict. But I do think it's important to just highlight, again, some of the struggles that we work through. I think that when we were deliberating, we took a good faith effort to extend a lot of our contracts based on the fact that we were hearing some things from Des Moines. And so, we've done some of that work, and the university has as well. And so I think we can craft a letter that isn't, we're the city telling you what to do, and it's more, hey, we're supportive of whatever efforts come from this where both parties can benefit.
Right.
And, word it from that standpoint. And then highlight, I could see a sandwich effect. Not a sandwich effect, but more like my sandwich, where there's heavy meat on the top, is, the focus on union rights, the focus on our relationship with the university, and talking about how each of us can work together. And so 3 paragraphs, boom, boom. Not saying I'm going to write it, but you got it.
You're going to write it? Yeah, for me, I guess I agree with Kinsley. I support sending like this letter of support, yeah.
Well, I hear 4 people saying I should write such a letter, so I'll draw upon these alleged diplomatic skills
You're very diplomatic.
to write such a thing.
You do an excellent job.
Well, a person can be diplomatic until a person's not, and then it all falls apart. So. Okay, so if I really like some of the language you used, but I didn't get it all written down, and I know if I ask you to repeat what you said, you won't be able to do it.
Yeah.
Could you? Can you take a stab at kind of revisiting the way you phrase that?
Let's talk after. We can talk after. Yeah.
All right. That sounds good to me. Okay, let's see. Any other information items from the May 10 packet?
No.
I'm going to guess the answer is no. Can we go through council updates on assigned boards, et cetera? Maybe we can start with John, move to the left.
I did want to mention at ICAD there were 2 presentations, and I'm looking for my notes. I have kind of a pile here, so I'll just have to refer to my memory, and that is two presentations, one by the CEO of ACT, and the other by an organization, a company, IDX, I believe they're called. They work on retinal technology, kind of automated medical procedures. Is that right, Jeff? Did I get the? It was a very interesting contrast, which is why I thought I'd pass it on to you. IDX is doing quite well. The FDA just approved one of their procedures in terms of local connectivity. There are many of their employees are from the state of Iowa, university educated here. And so it's a very positive experience hearing their story. And then that was followed by ACT, which is going through what seem to be pretty dramatic changes in their organizational structure and their mission. They're moving beyond, not that they're leaving behind assessment, but working on expanding their services because assessments are no longer necessarily required at universities and missions. So, how can they help with diagnostics of, the educational process before it comes to the assessment point? This is leading to issues of mergers and acquisitions that ACT is pursuing. And so the business model and the structure of the business seem to be in flux, which may have significant impacts on employment in Iowa City in the long term. So it was kind of a very candid conversation or presentation by the CEO. ACT, like IDX, kind of had local origins. So it was interesting. The contrast between the two presentations were pretty startling, and I think there was certainly some concern after the ACT presentation as to the future of ACT in the city. And Jeff, I don't know if you have anything to contribute to this, but it was, ACT and Pearson are 2 and 3 in terms of employment in Iowa City. So this is a fairly major employment issue that we could be facing.
I think you summed it up well. The bottom line is it's an industry that's rapidly changing. The model that they have followed for so long is no longer going to be relevant going forward, so they're reinventing themselves. And anytime you go through that process, everything's on the table. And I wasn't at that particular meeting, but have heard those comments. And I think it's, we have to express our support and our interest, but at the same time, we have to know that they're evolving and they're changing, and we hope they continue to do that here. But as we saw with Procter & Gamble, these large companies, whether they're homegrown or not, they have to make decisions in what's best for their particular business interest. So we're going to do everything we can. I know I can, and others will do the same to express our support and make sure that they stay here and they grow here. And that's all we can do.
Okay, Rockne?
I don't have any update with the City of Lit Board.
Oz?
I don't have a bid because the City Transit, they just meet like every 3 months, and the next one will be on the 22nd. Yeah.
Nothing. Okay, so I attended a public Partnership for Alcohol Safety meeting, as did Simon, as did Chief Matherly, on May the 8th. And the group did some brainstorming to identify priorities for the 2019-2022 Alcohol Harm Reduction Plan. And Chief Matherly provided a really fine overview about the work that the neighborhood and downtown officers are doing and will be doing. And there were some other things, but those were the key topics, right, Simon? Yeah. There's also going to be a CVB board meeting, Convention and Visitors Bureau board meeting on the 17th, 2 days from now. I've asked Pauline to join me at that so she can get a sense of how that meeting goes. Also, as this has nothing to do with committees or boards, as promised, I have completed a final revised draft of the letter concerning the widening of I-380. I shared it with Jeff. I think we can move ahead with it now to try to set up a working group conversation with other mayors and other interested parties. And yeah, so moving ahead on that. Anything else?
As I mentioned, the Access Center Committee continues to meet. We had a steering committee meeting yesterday morning, and they have asked me, since Iowa City is kind of a key player in this with the amount of money we've committed for the facility, they've asked me to join the executive committee as well. We did have, a number of us participated in a closed session with the Board of Supervisors. I believe it was last week. It was closed. Basically, all I can say, it was closed under state law, allowing closed session for discussion of potential property, purpose of discussing potential properties. So other than that, things continue to move along, and we're getting we've got a full-time project manager now working with the group. I think that's really going to help, especially with Jessica Peckover having left. We needed somebody to kind of fill her shoes. And looking to set up some subcommittees within the steering committee to work on various things from facility to policies and procedures and codes and stuff, the healthcare codes for reimbursement and those kinds of things. So, and still discussing name, because that's a huge issue. So we'll see where that lands.
Okey-doke. I think we can call it quits for now and get back together for the formal meeting at 7 o'clock.